Hello, Manhwa lovers. I hope you're having a great day. I want to start by thanking everyone who commented on the last video. Your support motivates me to keep uploading more content. A special shout out to Deetrolin P8F for once again being the first to comment. On a new day, we find ourselves in the Occult Research Club room, where our protagonist, Kim Junub, was debating with one of his friends about the possibility of someone remembering their past lives. Although she couldn't prove it at that moment, she had decided to join the club to investigate it further. This only strengthened Kim's stance, as he argued that if it couldn't be proven, then it had no real basis. To him, anything that couldn't be explained scientifically was meaningless, so he sarcastically suggested she try again in 100 days. This remark infuriated the girl, who responded with a direct punch to Kim. Shocked, Kim turned to her and called her Parkham Bean, thinking she was a bit crazy for hitting him. However, for the redhead, the punch was well-deserved, and she didn't hesitate to call him out on his attitude. She questioned why he had even joined the club if all he did was contradict their beliefs. Kim, remaining calm but firm, replied that his goal was to prove that occultism didn't exist. According to him, all the documents, stories, and theories about hidden civilizations were absurd and lacked credibility, especially in the 20th century. He even joked that someone like Steve Hobbs would be disappointed by such nonsense. Hearing this, Vin mocked him, calling him insane, while Kim retorted that the only crazy one was her, since she had a habit of hitting people for no reason. At that moment, two classmates who had been watching nearby intervened. They asked if they were going to keep fighting despite knowing each other since middle school, or if their relationship had always been this tense. With a teasing tone, they even suggested that it would be cute to see them fall in love, just like the two of them had. For Kim, it was incomprehensible how that couple displayed so much affection in public, while Eunbin, ever pragmatic, wished that Yang, the girl in the relationship, would dress less revealingly and stop clinging to her boyfriend in front of everyone. However, the couple interpreted their reactions as jealousy, arguing that, unlike them, Kim and Eunbin only fought. The situation was interrupted when another girl, Yuna, arrived to put an end to the argument. Using a conciliatory tone, she asked them to stop fighting and try to get along. Although Kim respected Yuna a lot, he found it difficult to comply with her request. Meanwhile, Eunbin noticed the water bottle Yuna was holding, which, according to Eunbin, tasted oddly similar to toothpaste. Despite this, Yuna admitted, somewhat embarrassed, that she found it delicious. Shortly after, the club president, Jason, arrived. Noticing the tense atmosphere, she immediately asked what had happened and why they were fighting again. She also turned her attention to Yuna, scolding her for once again failing in her task of maintaining peace in the club. With an air of authority, Jason advised Yuna to be more assertive when giving orders, reminding her that, as a senpai, she had the power to make others obey, even if it meant forcing them to try her drink. This comment made Yuna reflect deeply on the weight of her authority within the club. At that precise moment, Yuna raised her voice and called out to Kim, ordering him to drink from her bottle. This made him incredibly nervous, as he couldn't help but think that doing so would be like sharing an indirect kiss with his senpai. His expression of confusion and nervousness didn't go unnoticed by Eunbin, who watched him closely. Just as Kim was lost in thought, wondering if this was the first step toward getting closer to Yuna, another hand grabbed the bottle before he could react. By the time Kim realized it, it was too late. Eunbin was already drinking from the bottle without a second thought. Outraged, Kim scolded the redhead for taking something that, to him, had a special meaning. However, Eunbin casually replied that she assumed he didn't want it. Yet after taking a couple of sips, her expression changed dramatically. Disgusted, she nearly gagged, complaining that the taste was awful. Still irritated, Kim shouted at her, asking why she had taken something that wasn't hers if she didn't even like it. At that moment, Jason approached and questioned why the two of them argued so often, joking that if they kept it up, they might end up falling in love. She even teased that if they continued at this rate, they wouldn't just end up together. They might even have a child if they weren't careful. This comment left Kim and Eunbin completely embarrassed as they scrambled to defend themselves. Trying to justify herself, Eunbin pointed at Kim, explaining that they only argued because he insisted on contradicting everything discussed in the club. Kim quickly denied it, insisting that his only goal was to prove that occultism didn't exist. Furious, Eunbin challenged him to prove once and for all that everything she had said was false. Kim found this whole situation frustrating, as he couldn't understand when Eunbin had become so interested in occultism. What he didn't know was that, deep down, the redhead was very aware that her curiosity had started because of a particular person who had joined the club. At that moment, Jason, noticing that another argument was about to start, stepped in and asked if proving something to Kim would be enough to settle the debate. The question left Kim slightly confused, while Jason, with a mischievous smile, pulled out an intriguing piece of material related to the occult. She was certain that if Kim took a look at it, it would be enough to capture his interest. Although Yunin was curious about what Jason meant, she explained that behind the school, there was a 100-year-old Geno tree surrounded by a legend claiming it could grant a wish. She then suggested that they all go together to make a wish and see if it would come true. Jason asked for their thoughts on the idea, but to Kim, it all seemed completely ridiculous. However, Jason began to sense his hesitation and wasted no time in provoking him by calling him a coward. Kim was clearly irritated by this, though the club's couple quickly clarified that they had no interest in the matter and chose to ignore the proposal. It was then that Kim, gathering his courage, decided to check it out for himself and invited Eunbin and Yuna to join him. Although Yuna was hesitant, she ultimately agreed to go, and Jason also chose to tag along. That afternoon, they headed into the forest, where they stumbled upon the club's couple performing a rather bizarre ceremony. They were loudly attempting an improvised ritual to help Yonu find peace for her soul. Her partner had even brought holy water to purify her. However, neither of them seemed to notice that the others were watching from behind the bushes, surprised and slightly embarrassed by the unusual scene. Now, let's rewind a little. As they made their way toward their destination, doubts lingered in everyone's minds about whether they were truly on the right path. Juna thought she had heard the voice of a ghost, but Kim remained confident, assuring them that they weren't lost. The presence of new trees along the way was proof that they were heading in the right direction. However, Jason felt that everything around them looked the same, which only increased her uncertainty. With a sigh of frustration, Eunbin finally admitted that letting someone who was already lost guide them to the great tree had been a terrible decision. Annoyed by the comment, Kim demanded to know who she was referring to as a lost navigator, though he didn't miss the chance to fire back by calling her a gorilla. This enraged the redhead, who warned him that if he said it again, she'd beat him up. But Kim, in his usual stubborn manner, repeated the insult just to provoke her. Eunbin was on the verge of making good on her threat when Jason quickly intervened, urging them both to stop. Although they reluctantly obeyed, Jason suddenly asked if anyone else had heard a strange sound. This alarmed Juna, who couldn't help but feel uneasy. Kim, trying to stay calm, began listening carefully to pinpoint the source of the sound. It was Jason who pointed in the direction it came from, determined to find out what it was, as her curiosity had been piqued. As they moved forward, Eunbin felt an uneasy premonition, as if something could go wrong at any moment. Meanwhile, Yugu was experiencing a deep sense of tranquility while praying outdoors. For her, the use of holy water brought a comforting peace. When she asked her boyfriend if he had heard anything, he denied having noticed any noise. Meanwhile, none of the others said a word. The atmosphere was so silent that no one dared to break the stillness. Finally, the redhead spoke up, questioning whether it was really necessary to stray from their path just to investigate that sound. Yuna, though agreeing with Eunbin, couldn't shake the feeling that something strange was happening. While she had some experience with religious practices, she had never delved into anything as profound as this. For her part, Eunbin wondered what those two were even doing in the forest, finding them a bit eccentric since it was the first time she had seen someone pray with such devotion. Meanwhile, Kim thought that if he ever had to attend a mass, he would rather watch it online than experience it in person. Deep down, however, he wouldn't mind sharing such an experience with Juna someday. Just then, something interrupted his thoughts. A leaf fell on his head. Looking up, he observed his surroundings and asked with some uncertainty, "Is this the sacred tree we've been searching for?" Now standing beneath the tree, Jason suggested that Kim make a wish, something he believed to be impossible to achieve. Though hesitant at first, he stared at the tree for a few moments. At that instant, Juna asked Kim what they should wish for, while Yunin wanted to know what they had to do. Eventually, the three joined hands to make their wishes. Juna wished for everyone to get along. Eunbin wished to have a good relationship with a certain person, and Kim wished for someone to confirm whether the occult was real. However, their thoughts were soon interrupted. The scene of prayers they had witnessed earlier still lingered in their minds. In particular, Juna found herself wondering what a mass truly was. Eunbin questioned whether she would ever attend one, and Kim couldn't shake the feeling of jealousy toward John. What none of them noticed was that behind them, Jason was silently observing their expressions, a small smile playing on her lips. Kim finally finished making his wish, and Jason asked if he was sure, suggesting he think it over a little more. But for Kim, that was enough. After all, he firmly believed it was nothing more than a myth, something that would never actually happen. Jason, however, had a feeling he would be punished for such thoughts. But Kim didn't care. Still, he asked Yuna what she had wished for. Slightly nervous, she admitted that it probably wouldn't come true. Resigned, Kim concluded that there was no way to prove anything, prompting Yongun to scold him for being so pessimistic. In response, Kim mockingly called the redhead a talking gorilla. At that moment, Jason suggested they leave if they had nothing else to do. Yet, Kim couldn't stop thinking about his wish. He realized that instead of asking for what he truly wanted, his mind had been consumed by thoughts about the mass, which were growing more intense. Then, he suddenly heard a voice whisper, "I will grant your wish, but in exchange, I will curse it." Kim immediately felt his phone start to vibrate, sending a wave of anxiety through him. Checking the screen, he saw that he had received a message. His expression turned to pure terror. Eunbin caught up to him just then, reminding him that it was time to leave and asking why he looked so frightened. A quick glance at Kim's phone revealed the message. He had been given a mission. He had to attend a mass with Eunbin. The message was clear. If he failed, he would die instantly. Kim wondered what that strange message meant, or why it asked him to do something so unusual, especially since it required him to meet Eunbin for a mass. He decided to approach the redhead and ask if she had also received a suspicious message. However, Eunbin, visibly flustered, wanted to know why he was asking such a thing. Her reaction caught Kim off guard, making him even more nervous, as it was not the response he had expected. Even so, Eunbin glanced at him shyly before suddenly running off, insisting it was nothing, leaving Kim even more confused and unable to make sense of what had just happened. The next day, no matter how much he thought about it, everything still seemed too bizarre to Kim. He couldn't understand what kind of person would send such a message, nor how he was supposed to take something like a mass so lightly, especially one involving Eunbin. To him, a mass was supposed to be something personal, reserved for someone you loved or planned to marry. What irritated him the most was that everything revolved around Eunbin, who often played pranks on him. He saw her as some sort of gorilla, which led him to suspect that the message might just be another one of her jokes. Even more frustrating was the fact that everyone had to return home early because of the pervert who had sent that text. Although he tried to downplay the message, he couldn't stop thinking about the voice he had heard that day. Ultimately, he dismissed the idea that the curse was real, convinced it was all just some absurd act. However, his perspective would change if someone actually tried to kill him. At that moment, a sinister voice whispered repeatedly, asking if he truly didn't believe in what was happening. It warned him that he would be punished, his life taken as proof of the truth. Just then, power lines snapped and came crashing down toward Kim. As he was electrocuted, the voice offered him a second chance, but only if he proved that he accepted reality. With his last bit of strength, Kim gasped that he did believe and begged to be spared, as he had yet to confess his feelings and refused to die this way. The voice, seemingly satisfied, warned that this was merely a warning. If he wanted to survive and see his wishes granted, he had to follow its instructions. It then commanded him to hold a mass with Eunbin within 2 days. Suddenly, Kim opened his eyes, springing to his feet to check if he was still alive. The lingering pain confirmed that what had happened was no dream. Trembling, he realized he couldn't afford to die like that. He had to go through with the mass. His survival depended on it. A few days later, Kim was still obsessing over how to convince Eunbin. The time he had left had dwindled to less than 13 hours. He knew she wouldn't like the idea, not even if he just brought it up. But his biggest problem was holding a mass without any prior relationship. The fear for his life pushed him to the brink of desperation. He even pleaded in his mind for Eunbin to accept. He wondered if he should beg her, but if he did, she might just get angry and finish him off herself. Trying to calm down, Kim lightly smacked his own face, reminding himself to take things one step at a time. First, he needed to find Eunbin. Then, he had to create the right atmosphere to talk to her and make the mass happen. As he entered the club, Juna immediately greeted him. Though he returned the greeting, his eyes couldn't help but scan the room for the redhead. Juna, feeling pleased with herself, commented that although Jisun, the club president, often arrived late, she, as the vice president, was always present to ensure everything ran smoothly. Meanwhile, Kim noticed that the usual couple hadn't arrived yet, but he did see Jaido and waved at her. Yuna, realizing that Kim seemed to be searching for someone, asked why he was looking around so much. He casually replied that he was looking for Eunbin, which immediately piqued Juna's curiosity. Though Kim insisted it was nothing, Juna was unconvinced. She found it odd, considering how often he and Eunbin argued. With a teasing tone, she hinted that maybe something was going on between them, just as Jisun had once suggested. Kim vehemently denied it, insisting that he only saw Eunbin as a gorilla. However, Jonah noticed that he didn't seem entirely sincere and figured it was all the same to her. She couldn't help but feel a little disappointed, realizing that while Kim was searching for Eunbin, she was standing right in front of him. A bit uneasy, Kim admitted that he was also checking who else was present in the club but confessed that finding Eunbin was urgent. Still, he couldn't help but notice how beautiful Yuna looked at that moment. Jaido suddenly got up from her seat and approached Kim. She stared intently at the chalice he was holding, making him feel embarrassed, as he had no idea what she was thinking. After a brief pause, Jaido simply told him to forget about it, leaving Kim even more confused. Just then, Jun recalled hearing that Yumin had gone to the preparation room a little while ago. She mentioned that the redhead hadn't looked well and had probably gone to rest. Upon hearing this, Kim immediately dashed toward the room, leaving Yuna a bit concerned, wondering if what he had to tell Yumin was really that urgent. As he ran, Kim kept shouting Yunbin's name. When he finally reached the room, he found her standing there in silence. He questioned what she was doing in that place, and upon looking at her, he asked if she was feeling all right, as she had a strange expression. However, Yunbin quickly turned around, stepped closer to Kim, and to his surprise, kissed him. Kim was utterly bewildered by her sudden action but did nothing to push her away. At that moment, he wondered if this was really his first kiss, and more importantly, if it had just happened with Eunbin. Shocked, he quickly pulled away and asked if they were even allowed to do that. Blushing, she threw the question back at him. Had he not liked it, or was it because he didn't see her as a woman? Kim didn't fully understand what she meant. But then, Yumin explained that since the day before, she had felt something was off with her soul after receiving a peculiar message. She also admitted that she had been thinking about him constantly, feeling a deep tingling sensation in her heart, combined with a warmth that made her sweat and was driving her insane. As she spoke, Eunbin recalled the moment she had received that strange message. Though she didn't understand why she had to have a mass with Kim, she couldn't shake the feeling that something bad might happen if she ignored it. She even got angry, thinking someone was playing a cruel joke on her. Despite her flushed face, the situation made her uncomfortable. However, the image of the lover's mass from class crossed her mind, and she convinced herself that Kim had been the one to send the odd message, especially since she had seen him checking his phone right when she brought up the topic. She chuckled slightly, thinking that after seeing a couple holding a mass, Kim must have wanted to do the same with her. After all, she reasoned, it was only natural. He was a man, after all. Yet, in a quiet voice, she admitted that if she ever did end up in a relationship with him, it wouldn't be so bad. Shortly after, she laughed at herself, calling herself silly for entertaining such thoughts, knowing that Kim was just joking and that she shouldn't take it seriously. Although she considered herself quite intelligent, she couldn't comprehend how something so unusual was happening. Despite the threat in the message, she was sure Kim would never attempt something like this. Suddenly, a vase came crashing down on her head. The last thought that crossed Yunbin's mind was wondering what had just happened. Had she already crossed over to the other side? Had she really died? As her consciousness faded, she realized that although she had been content with just being Kim's friend, it would have been much better if they could have been something more. That thought, so clear even in such an extreme moment, confirmed that she truly had feelings for him. Realizing this, she instantly regretted it. She didn't want to die this way. She wanted to live so she could stop fighting with Kim and finally ask him out. At that moment, a mysterious voice asked if she truly wished to keep living. The voice claimed to have fulfilled its promise and expected her to believe now. If she accepted, she would be given another chance. Desperate, Yunbin swore she believed and begged for her life, saying that she had finally acknowledged her feelings and didn't want it all to end there. The mysterious voice agreed, but warned her that if she wanted to continue living and achieve the romance she longed for, she had to follow its instructions. It commanded her to hold a mass with Kim within 2 days. During that time, her soul would feel an uncontrollable urge to fulfill that ritual. Back in the present, Kim asked Eunbin if she had also received the message that warned they would die instantly if they didn't perform the mass. Intrigued, Eunbin wanted to know if he had really received it. Kim confirmed it, adding that at first he hadn't believed it, but then it turned out to be real. Upon hearing this, Yunin was speechless for a moment, but then she smiled and asked if he also wanted to keep living. Kim firmly denied any desire to die, and in response, Eunbin admitted that she didn't want to either. That was why she proposed to Kim that they hold a mass. Though she wasn't entirely sure, she felt she had also received a warning after getting the message, and ever since, a strange pain in her soul wouldn't leave her alone. She explained that it wasn't something she particularly wanted to do with him, but she saw it as a way to survive. Then Eunbin asked if he would be willing to go through with the mass, even if his life depended on it. Nervous, Kim refused outright, explaining that for him, such an experience should be shared with someone he truly loved. However, before he could continue, Eunbin suddenly pulled out the chalice that Kim had been keeping. Though he remained visibly still, she, slightly embarrassed, observed the chalice carefully. In her mind, Eunbin couldn't shake the feeling that all of this was incredibly strange. As she examined it more closely, she noticed a faint glow emanating from the chalice and wondered how she could make it shine more intensely. It became clear that her faith in Kim needed to strengthen a bit more to achieve that. Determined, Eunbin decided to reveal her true intentions. She knew that Kim probably didn't see her as a real woman, and for that reason, she wanted to look her best. With confidence, she adjusted her appearance and asked how she looked. Even though she was wearing slightly loose clothing, her natural beauty stood out effortlessly. As she did so, she took the opportunity to express her feelings, referring to them as something she considered an undeniable truth. Kim stared at Eunbin, utterly surprised, especially because he hadn't expected her to be hiding those loaves beneath such loose clothing. At that moment, Eunbin noticed the chalice glowing intensely, but at the same time, she sensed Kim's uncertainty. With a calm voice, she reminded him that they needed to perform a mass in order to survive, something he already knew, even though he couldn't quite understand where her confidence was coming from. It was then that Eunbin, somewhat embarrassed, confessed that she also felt nervous since it was her first mass. However, she assured him that, given their lives were at stake, nothing else mattered. Kim, a little flustered, understood that, but couldn't help but ask if she was truly sure about having her first mass with him. As their gazes met, he perceived that Eunbin's soul seemed deeply corrupted and overflowing with darkness, which made him blush as he realized what he had to do. Deep inside, Kim knew it wouldn't be easy, but he was determined. Moreover, when he heard Eunbin confirm her agreement, he started to wonder if everything was connected to the curse. At that moment, Eunbin took the chalice, noticing its intense glow. Kim, on the other hand, picked up the loaves that the girl had been holding to prevent them from falling. As he held them, he couldn't resist playing with them slightly. They were as soft as pillows. He also observed the small gummy buttons decorating the loaves, which made Eunbin feel quite embarrassed. She quickly asked him to stop getting distracted and start using a jutsu. That request left Kim completely stunned, as he couldn't understand how someone who appeared so pure could say something like that. After a moment, Kim helped Eunbin adjust herself better to complete the jutsu. Despite how strange everything felt, both seemed to enjoy the preparations for the mass. It was unexpected for them to be so close to each other. When Eunbin was finally ready to begin the prayers, their faces gradually drew nearer. Just as they were about to kiss, a voice interrupted them from outside. Someone was asking why they hadn't come out yet. It was Juna, who had been looking for both of them. When she entered the room, she found no one, which she found odd. She wondered where Kim and Eunbin could have gone. Meanwhile, they had hidden inside a closet. Kim, a bit nervous, didn't understand why Yuna was looking for them, but realizing how close he was to Eunbin, he couldn't help but blush. Suspicious that they were hiding, Yuna eventually left the room, which relieved both of them. But when Kim and Eunbin locked eyes, still feeling embarrassed, they decided to come out of their hiding place. Once outside, still blushing from what had happened, Eunbin took the initiative and said that, even though the moment's excitement had passed, they still needed to finish what they had started. Both made their way to the couch to continue their prayers. Eunbin, visibly nervous, was ready to begin the mass, while Kim, just as flustered, prepared himself to guide her on the path of faith. However, Kim had doubts, fearing that using holy water directly on Eunbin's soul could be dangerous. She disagreed, arguing that it wouldn't truly be a mass if they didn't use the holy water in that way. In the end, Kim understood the situation and used the water to cleanse her sins. Eunbin felt the blessing fill her heart and even joked that he had used too much water, while Kim remained lost in thought. Realizing that he had just performed a mass with her, he immediately checked his phone to see if the curse had been lifted. However, he was stunned to find that it was still there. Worse yet, a new task had appeared. One of them had to lead the next ritual. Confused, he couldn't understand why they had to perform another one. As he processed the information, his phone slipped from his hands while Eunbin insisted that they should follow the instructions exactly as written. According to what she had read, it was now his turn to guide the mass. These words made Kim blush, but neither of them noticed that Juna was outside, eavesdropping on everything happening inside the room. Intrigued, She wondered what was going on and why they were holding a mass in that place. Just as she was about to grab her guitar, her phone suddenly rang. Curious, she checked it, and upon reading the message, her face turned bright red. Her mission was to hold a mass with Kim, otherwise she would die.